with Fidance, and I'm here with my friend Mason Clutter with Frostbound Todd. Mason, do you want to introduce yourself real quick and kind of share with everybody watching and reading about who you are and what you're doing with FBT?
Hi, Spencer. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be with you today. So, as you mentioned, I'm Mason Clutter. I serve as the privacy lead at Frost Brown Todd. And what that really means is I help our clients operationalize privacy to achieve their goals, their business goals, while meeting, of course, legal and compliance requirements, and hopefully, in the long run, building and maintaining trust with their own customers. So we've had the pleasure of getting to work together and just super excited to be here and talking with you today.
Awesome. What when you say privacy, that sounds like that's a word that everybody knows what privacy means, but in the context of what you do, what does privacy mean? How do you explain that to a client?
So I love this question. It can be and feel like a very complex question, but really what we're dealing with day to day is information about people or information that they've given you and their ability to understand and control that information. So we really operate on basic principles and questions like what data are you collecting and from whom? How are you using it? Who are you giving it to? For what
Mm.
purposes, right? Those types of questions. So it's really about people and data that reveals information about people.
Okay. Data that reveals information about people and trying to help people understand how to protect that. Okay, really good stuff there. So let's rewind here to your adolescence, your early years. Tell me about how did your early life experiences and upbringing shape your perspective on leadership and problem solving? Because I was a kid once and I didn't grow up thinking I want to be a business development manager with our family owned business, right? I grew up wanting to be a professional baseball player, golfer, whatever it was. And I'm sure you probably didn't grow up thinking I want to be the privacy lead at Frost Brown Todd.
Such a fun question. Thank you. So I grew up in a relatively small town in Southwest Florida. It was a lovely place to grow up. And I was super privileged to have unique opportunities and strong role models that helped shape my perspective on leadership and problem solving. So you're not wrong. I didn't walk around or really think about being a privacy lawyer per se, but lawyer was kind of always in the back of my mind. And I think that's because my mom really raised us to be independent, to speak up for ourselves, and to find reasonable solutions to problems. So it's probably no surprise then that I became a lawyer. But as you mentioned, privacy lawyer, that would have been a little specific. And I really think that's something that's actually relatively new, over the past 15 to 20 years. So what I've come to learn is that whether, addressing a day-to-day issue in my personal life or somebody else's personal life, or advising the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security when I was the Chief Privacy Officer there, or advising clients on how to achieve their business goals. I think that being a good leader and a problem solver requires strong active listening skills, understanding what's really at issue and trying to find a solution that is practical, understandable, and helps move forward the goals of the individual or the group involved. And I think a key part of that, of course, is follow through and accountability. So I've really had the opportunity and privilege to observe and work with some amazing leaders over my career, as well as learning from them as a child. And so I've learned from and adopted strategies from each of them that I carry with me and apply every day.
That's awesome. Can you share about like a specific moment in your career? Maybe it was a project, maybe it was a situation that significantly contributed to your growth as a leader.
Yeah, so the first that comes to mind is when I was given the opportunity to lead a small independent federal agency in the federal government. It was called the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. we were responsible for conducting oversight on counterterrorism activities and ensuring that they were appropriately balanced with privacy and civil liberties. And so I, at some point, served as an acting executive director to that agency. And really, I had to run the agency. I reported to a board of five presidentially appointed Senate confirmed board members. And I was also responsible for leading and managing their oversight work. And so that was a very significant leadership challenge, and one that I was certainly prepared for, but for which I had great advisors and mentors and support across the board, which then led to my second, and I think most career defining opportunity in a leadership role. And that was when I was appointed as the Chief Privacy Officer to the US Department of Homeland Security. And so in that role, I advised the secretary, the deputy secretary, and agency heads across the department. So think Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and even the Federal Emergency Management Agency on how to achieve their unique missions, whether it was a law enforcement mission or an emergency response mission in a privacy preserving manner. I also ran an office with a team of about 70 people. And I really learned from that team who worked with me to work collaboratively, understand unique perspectives, diverse viewpoints and experiences, and to advise individuals at the highest level of government while, of course, observing and learning from their leadership skills. So, as I mentioned previously, I carry that experience with me every day. And I'm just incredibly grateful for the opportunity that I had to serve in that role, to work with such interesting, unique experts, and to learn from them.
That's impressive. There's an office of 70 people. That's a lot. That's a lot of folks that you're overseeing there. Did you, 70 people, it's probably difficult to get to know every one of them individually. So you talked about working collaboratively. How has that kind of made its way into what you do now? Like, how important is collaboration in your current role? Like, do you have any, um, yeah, let's stick with that question specifically. How much are you collaborating with other folks in your role now? How much does that affect what you do now?
So it's a wonderful question, Spencer. And I think it's absolutely critical to ensuring that the way in which a business operationalizes its privacy is consistent with its goals, with its other priorities, with the ways in which it engages with its own clients. And so I work collaboratively both with clients across their businesses and with the firm and my colleagues across the firm, because at Frost Brown Todd, we really are a full service law firm. We can help advise clients from soup to nuts, but there's not one of us who can be an expert or know everything. So I work very closely, for example, with my colleagues who focus on technology and transactions, because if a client, for instance, is looking to outsource some of their services or support for their services, whether it's cloud computing or cloud storage or software as a service or platforms as a service, I work with contracting experts, technology experts, and then, of course, I add privacy and security expertise to ensure that we are approaching those agreements and vetting those vendors in a way that is compliant with the law, compliant with our clients' existing policies, but also, again, taking that broader approach and consideration of the full business and the full business goals.
What so you mentioned that that's an impressive thing to share. So you were a chief privacy officer in your time with the federal government. What tell me like this is a very broad question and forgive me, I don't think I wrote this one down, but like tell me about the biggest difference between that role and what you're doing now, because you went from working with the federal government to now working with private small businesses, small to mid-sized businesses. Like describe that the biggest difference between those two
Yeah, so I
roles.
think you'll be surprised to learn that it really doesn't differ that much. And so, sure, I am now supporting private sector clients compared to advising law enforcement agency heads. But as I mentioned previously, the nature of privacy and security really doesn't change. And I have been applying the same guiding legal and privacy principles for years with a focus on what, as I've been saying, I call operationalizing privacy. So, in fact, most of the US state and international privacy laws and regulations are based on those same principles. So, for my clients, of course, the stakes are very real, whether we're talking about DHS, a law enforcement context, or the private sector. And it's really been a privilege and a new challenge to advise private sector clients on how best to operationalize privacy to achieve their business goals, both in a privacy respecting and transparent manner. So the concepts of building and maintaining trust with your stakeholders are also the same. And it's really about striking the right balance from a compliance perspective, a business perspective, and your client's expectation perspective. That is both challenging and for me, it's been very rewarding. So it's been so much fun to learn about our clients personally. I've enjoyed my conversations with you, of course, and of course, professionally, and to support them in achieving their goals. I just really feel very lucky to be a very small part of their success and to help I stand by and to help them with any challenges that may arise. But really, at the end of the day, it's not all that different. I will say, having 265,000 employees at the Department of Homeland Security and overseeing kind of the privacy requirements there, it has been a bit of a relief to kind of step away from that and to be able to focus on, kind of one client at a time and their particular needs. It really does give you an opportunity to get to know folks and to really help find a strategy and approach that is best suited to their needs.
Sure. So you said specifically that the guiding or the guidance you provide isn't so much different in principle between the working with law enforcement leaders and with private businesses. Tell me, can you share like what are some of the guiding principles that you have, or are there like some core things that you can share for the audience of, hey, if you want to protect yourself and protect your information, like here are just some principles that I would share with you that are important.
Yeah, so I think what's so interesting about privacy today is that really a lot of our clients and a lot of businesses are technology companies, whether they're offering a technology service or not, primarily because they are engaged in collecting data and using data, and managing clients and information through the services that they're providing. And so the key principles I'm referring to are what we call the Fair Information Practice Principles. And they've been around now for a good 40 years. And really, those are the basic questions of and principles of only collecting the information you need, right, to perform the service that you're offering. Only keeping that information and only using it for the purposes that you said you were collecting it for, only keeping it for as long as you need it, and then ensuring that it is securely deleted and no longer retained because we know that the longer we keep information that we don't need, the higher the security risk we're presenting. So those types of questions about, the security apparatuses and guidelines and frameworks that you have around your data, those are the same common themes we see, whether it is in US state privacy laws, international regulations like the Global Data Protection Regulation, or as we know it, the GDPR, or any other kind of uh, sector specific frameworks, whether it's healthcare under HIPAA or financial institutions, for example. Those are always going to be the guiding principles. And those really go hand in hand, both with privacy and ensuring safeguarding of people's information, as well as security, whether it's from a cyber perspective or otherwise, to ensure, that you are, in fact, have mechanisms in place to keep that information safe.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's some similarities to how we advise our clients. So we get a lot of inquiries for penetration tests. So a very common thing is for a small business owner to they're not a security professional, right? And somebody they hear a presentation and what they learn from it is, oh, I need a pen test if I want to have good cybersecurity. And that is one small element of your security posture is learning if somebody can break into your systems, or if they're in, what can they do with your systems? And we have to advise clients on um, specifically what's the driving force behind your penetration tests. Because frankly, from a consulting perspective, these are really expensive engagements. I mean, we're both in the business, right, of billing time, and our time is super valuable and very expensive to that person, right? And so we have to talk folks off the ledge of, maybe you don't need a pen test. Maybe you need something that's quite different than that. Maybe you want us to assess your security posture. But the reference that we start with is what regulatory bodies are mandating a pen test on you, or if it's not a compliance requirement or a regulatory body, is there a large client you have? A lot of small businesses, us included, they have one or two clients that encompass 40 to 60% of their entire portfolio. And so they have a lot of dependency on these specific organizations. And those organizations will frequently mandate to their third party vendors, hey, we need evidence that you're secure vis-a-vis a penetration test. And so we advise clients from a security perspective on the best way to assess your what you have to have in order to stay in business is to start with regulatory bodies, compliance mandates, and mandates from clients. And then after that, it's what do you have to have, and then it's what should you have, right? And that comes into play of having MFA deployed across different applications and different devices. That's having endpoint and endpoint solution. It's having a I can get into all kinds of different things to keep clients secure, but definitely some similarities there in hearing. I just learned a ton about data too, and how you advise clients on keeping data their data secure. I had never heard of those principles either before. I'm trying to think of the specific acronym you shared of the free
The
data
fair, the fair
fair.
information practice principles. We also call them the FIPS.
That's that is great. I had never heard of this before, so I feel very educated now. I feel like I understand quite a bit more. So let's move things along here. So two different. I know these are two different things, and I want you to speak to both of these individually. Um, how has compliance and privacy? How have these two different things, which are certainly related in some sense, but they're their own distinct items, of course, how have those different ideas evolved throughout your career? It sounds like how you have advised clients might not have changed all too much because of those guiding principles that you've used throughout your career. But how specifically have those two changed in the market, in the world, as you've grown up in your career?
This is a great question. And I often say that privacy is where cybersecurity was 15 or 20 years ago, right? So it's no longer a nice to have, right? It is now top of mind in boardrooms across the world, not just from a risk perspective and not just from a compliance perspective, but from a business model perspective, right? Customers are savvy, they have evolved, and they demand more from the businesses with which they engage to safeguard their privacy. And in fact, privacy has become a business model in itself. So when you think about the intersection of cybersecurity and privacy, most of us have received those notifications in the mail that our information may have been breached, and how to safeguard and take action to safeguard essentially our privacy. And so, with that in mind, customers are making informed choices about the businesses they engage, sometimes based on privacy and security models. And so, from a compliance perspective, I will not suggest that it is easy. It certainly can be very challenging. Right now, we have 19 US state comprehensive privacy laws on the books. international regulations like the GDPR, and as I mentioned, other sector-specific requirements. So compliance really can feel like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. But what's most important from my perspective is to ensure that leaders are building an appropriate privacy and security safeguards from the beginning of whether it's a new or revised project, system, technology, or service that you're offering, because waiting until the last minute to consider privacy and security issues can cost you unnecessarily delay, cost, and unfortunately potentially increased risk. So understanding a client's business and their key goals, it really is key to advising how best to comply with the patchwork of requirements. And as I said previously, relying on those tried and true principles to design products and services, it's a great place to start. So reviewing and assessing and revising your practices regularly is also critically important, as you know, Spencer, even from a cyber perspective, because it helps you to identify new or evolving risks and to appropriately mitigate those risks. And at the end of the day, privacy really is about, the ability to know and the ability to take action to safeguard your information. So it's a risk mitigation business. And they are both privacy and security are not one and done, right? But it is an investment on the front end, continuing engagement throughout the cycle of the service that you're offering that can really help reduce long-term risk and costs, and I think help build and maintain trust with your own customers.
What do you so in security, like we have the NIST body, which provides all sorts of different cybersecurity frameworks to safeguard your business or safeguard your personal self. What in privacy, what specific framework would you advise um I guess the layman company on adhering to? I almost assume that there's probably some frameworks, just like there is in security, that you guys steer clients towards, or hey, are you following this specific framework? Or and maybe it's not specifically pertinent to privacy. Maybe it's a different kind of framework. But can you speak to that? What specific frameworks would you advise somebody to if they're trying to keep their information secure?
So this is always such an interesting question because certainly it would be very easy if we could point a client to a specific model and say, just do this and you'll be fine from a privacy perspective. So I think one benefit to this patchwork of privacy regulations across the United States is they are very similar, although not identical. So you do have to be aware of the differences and how they apply to your business, but they enable a lot of creativity and flexibility on implementation. So I think that ultimately, while that can present its own challenge, that's a good thing for a business to be able to assess the type of data they're collecting, why they need it, right? How they engage with their vendors and all around the services that they provide so that they can provide and develop their own framework to appropriately safeguard information, personal information, yes, in compliance with the regulations, but also in a way that best suits their business needs and their customers' needs. So I do think that is an interesting benefit of not having just one compliance framework for privacy, but it can be challenging. And so that's really what we're able to do at Frost Brown Todd in our privacy and security practice is to align all of those best practices with what is very critical to a business or a client based on their specific business practices, the data that they hold, and the ways in which they engage with their clients.
Would you say what this is a softball I'm throwing you. It sounds, would you say it's very fulfilling helping organizations mature how they view privacy and how to protect themselves?
Yes, for me, it really is. Call me a privacy nerd, but I am really enjoying it. And I think so many people understand, again, the concepts of privacy and the importance of privacy, whether you're a business owner or a customer, because again, we've all been subject to data breaches. We all understand now the risks, and they are significant risks that are posed if our data isn't handled appropriately. So every day I am working with clients who are going above and beyond just the baseline compliance clients, right? They really do see that as the floor and not the ceiling of what they should be doing for their customers. And that is a fun exercise to engage in. It's wonderful to work with good clients who are doing the right things for the right reasons and for their own customers. And so that's been just a joy and something I've learned and appreciated about my shift from the federal government to the private sector. Certainly, we've always asked the legal questions of what must I do? But as you pointed out, that question of what should I do is really much what is most critical to building and maintaining trust, whether you're looking at it from a federal government perspective with their stakeholders or from a private sector perspective with your customers.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask you here in a second to provide some privacy advice to like anybody, to like any single person. But so we work with a lot of wealth management practices. So companies that manage the wealth of high net worth individuals or folks that are on the back end of their careers and have aggregated all kinds of dollars and are investing that through different organizations. So we work with a lot of those kinds of companies. And we were just talking with one of them yesterday about how their clients will bring to them this question of, hey, how do I like keep myself secure? Because if you're a threat actor, like it's a numbers game to you, and certainly attacking a company and breaching a company and getting access to somebody's portfolio or a number of people's portfolios is certainly in your interest, but it's a numbers game. So whether that's a company or that's an individual, it doesn't, it's just a number to a threat actor. So how would you what are some uh, practical uh, life advice pieces you would give to somebody other than like reset your passwords when you get a email saying that your bank account was breached? Or what are some small things anybody can do to keep their own information secure?
Yeah, it's a great question. Certainly, I can't provide legal advice, in this context, but I think, there's there's a lot of ways you can approach this from free avenues to spending money with vendors that provide these services. But what I think is very important is being aware of the information that you are sharing, asking questions about if it's unclear to you, why do you need this? Is this optional to provide or required for the service I'm seeking? Right? Exercising your rights under state privacy laws to understand what businesses may be doing with your information, and really engaging with the businesses that you elect to engage with to have those critical conversations. And from a business perspective, that is why it's so very important to engage in what we call privacy by design. And that was what I was talking about earlier, is ensuring that whatever services you're providing on the front end, you are already accounting for as part of that service security and privacy safeguards, both to comply with the law and to provide these services to your clients consistent with your ability to do so and your business model. And ultimately, that will help clients on the front end be able to make good decisions about engaging with businesses. And it really can, in my opinion, put you in a competitive advantage when you start from that place of trust. Because as you mentioned, it really is a matter of when, not if, you're going to experience a cyber breach. But if businesses are putting into place these safeguards on the front end, the damage that is likely to result from those breaches is going to be lessened. And the ability to maintain that trust with your clients is going to be heightened. So that's really the approach that we take, both from an individual perspective and from a business perspective.
Okay, great. So, that kind of answered my last question here, which is what are some actionable steps a marketplace leader can do to protect their privacy? Is there any other general counsel that you can provide to somebody that's running a business or is a stakeholder in a business to protect and safeguard their information and their P&L and whatever data belongs to them?
Oh, absolutely. So, from a business perspective, as I mentioned, we are all technology companies at this time because if you have a website, you need a privacy policy. If you have a website, we've all seen those cookie banners that pop up with the opt out choices for individuals to opt out of tracking for purposes of targeted advertising and selling of data. So, that is very basic, minimal. Everybody who has a website needs that advice. And to take into consideration appropriate safeguards for the individuals who are using your services, including your websites or your applications. The other consideration, of course, is, as I mentioned before, outsourcing of business practices. So if you are working with vendors and any data is going to outside of your system, outside of your network to another third party, whether it's service provider, a vendor, or otherwise, having in place underlying agreements, including for personal information, data processing agreements, or they're also called personal information protection agreements, for how you are going to engage with that service provider and what the requirements are on them to uphold the privacy protections that you have applied to the data, the representations that you have made to your clients, the frameworks that you have put in place to comply with the law. Those trickle over and should trickle over to your own service providers. And it's very important that you have underlying agreements in place to ensure that they are held to the same standards that you are as the service provider to your customers. So that's some really basic areas that we see pretty much every day across the firm for every client in every industry that are commonly needed and really good place to start in thinking about your privacy compliance programs and framework. But it really can range from if you're dealing with very sensitive information, you may be required under law to conduct data privacy impact assessments. Those are certainly something that we can help with in the same way that you conduct, security threat assessments. You're looking at potential privacy related risks and taking steps to help mitigate those risks and conducting that analysis frequently and on a regular basis.
Hmm, that's great. So, actual last thing here then is tell people what are some ways they can engage with you? Like, how are some ways that you specifically services, I guess you could say you could provide. So that assessment that you just shared of someone's data, that's an interesting one. But how are some ways people can engage with you guys?
So this is such a good question. And really, you don't have to come to me directly because the firm understands, my colleagues understand that privacy and security really are a critical part of ensuring that a business is approaching risk and mitigating risk. But you're always welcome to reach out to me directly, whether it's through LinkedIn or through my email, which is available online. Our whole website, of course, is available online, but my email is mclutter, Clutter, at fbtlaw.com. And as I mentioned, primarily, every day we're talking with clients, whether it's about privacy policies, the data processing addendums I mentioned with respect to their service agreements. Unfortunately, clients are getting hit with litigation over website compliance issues or other privacy related issues in the states. And of course, from an enforcement perspective, whether it's at the federal level by the Federal Trade Commission or by the independent state attorneys general for enforcement of their unique privacy laws. So there's any number of ways a privacy issue could come up, but the best way and what we really want to see that we think is most helpful to our clients is engaging us on the front end so that we are building those safeguards into the services that they're offering, so that we are working closely both with their counsel as well as with their security and technology experts to ensure that there aren't information silos and that the safeguards that are in place make good common sense both to the business model and that they are affecting privacy and security on both sides of the equation.
Mason, thank you so much for your time. This is a great conversation.
Thank you, Spencer. This was so much fun.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.